Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our shirim on the Rebbe's Perush on the Maisios of Rabba Bar Bar Chana, printed in Yam HaChochma Tafshin Ayin Gimel. And this week we are continuing with the second interpretation that the Rebbe has on the fourth Maimar, which is the Orzila Bar Yuma. We spoke about the Orzila Bar Yuma last week in terms of the Gimel and the Dalid and the unification of three and four, and the need to unify Chachma and Bina, and to break free from the klipa that covers over the heart, to shatter the Lev HaEvan, and to uncover the secret depths of connectivity that are available at each and every moment, and the secret of the Igula and the Ribua, and the Halga, Kesar, and the Kesar, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef. And now we're going to go into a different interpretation that the Rebbe has. And so we see something unique here. Usually you see two different perushim from two different machabrim or two different sadikim, and one says one thing and the other says the other thing, and we can utilize the klal of elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim, how both are fundamentally true. But what we have over here is that the Rebbe is looking at the same mimer, and he's saying that there are two ways of reading the mimer, and they're both opinions that are coming from a singular source, yet nevertheless there's room for both. So it's the secret of elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim within a singular machaber, which is the secret of the endless creativity inherent within the Torah Hakadosha, especially the Maisios of Rabba Bar Bar Chana, which are buried within the third Masechta of Bava Basra in the fifth parak, which is the das of the Beis Mekdash Ashlishi, and to be mitaken all of the processes in order to reach the gilui of Atika Stima'a, to reach the gilui of a Torah that is the refinement of imagination, which is the representation of the third Beis Hamikdash with the secret of das. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba, right? Rabba Bar Bar Chana says, Ledidi Chazi, I saw, or Zila Bar Yuma. It was an antelope that was 1 day old, the Have Kahar Tabor, and it was as big as Har Tabor, Vahar Tabor, Kama Have Arba Parse, Umeshachad, the Tzavar, Tlasa Parse. How big is Har Tabor? It is extended upwards in 4 parsaos, and its width is 3 parsaos. Vibei Marba'ase Deresha Parsa Upalge, and the place where it rests its head is 1.5 parsaos, and Rama Kupta Vesachar La Liardana. And when it goes to the bathroom, it blocks up the entire Yarden River. So Zakt the Heilige Rebbe, Amar Rabba Ledidi Chazili or Zila Bar Yuma. What is this or Zila Bar Yuma? Earlier we looked at it as the or that is Zul, as the light of the future that is cheap in the eyes of individuals nowadays. But let's look at what the Rebbe wants to orient us towards in this reading. The Orzila is the Or Yud. It's representative of the Or of the Yud. The Yud is the first letter of the Shem Havaya, which represents Chachma. So the Orzila is the light of Chachma. Orzila is the light of Bittul. Orzila is the light of the clarification of Chachma. Or HaChochma, it's light of wisdom. Shuhuzol Hayom v'chashav la'asid. That can't be fully accessed now, and therefore it's cheap in the eyes of individuals, and it's only going to be placed in its proper place setting in the future, where people are going to become aware of how profoundly valuable this material is, the wisdom itself. Umegala or nishkav v'kadosh zeh bar yuma. But there is a hitznaitzus, there is a spark of the illumination of Chachma, the bittul b'metzias that comes with Chachma, that's revealed on that 1 day. What's that 1 day? It's the Yom HaMiyuchad of Shabbos Kodesh. On Shabbos Kodesh, there's a Te'ima of La'asad Lavo, which is the Hiskalus of the Chachma that is not revealed in accordance with our functioning, which operates in the space of Bina. But on Shabbos, there's a taste of Chachma, V'chein Elef Hashvi'i, and so too when it comes to the seventh millennia, not just the seventh day, which is the ascension of all things back to the womb of Bina, but in that place, on the Yom Shakula Shabbos and Menucha L'Chayer Lamim, that's when Chachma goes all the way up to Atik and the secret of Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Atik. Because like we saw last night in Rabbeinu, in Rabbi Nachman's teaching Torah Chafei, anytime there's an ascent of any level of the chain, every level of the chain is ascending. And while the ascension of the seventh generation is very often reflected as an ascension back up to the womb of Bina, nevertheless, when things return back up to the womb of Bina, even Chachma is going to go up a level. If Bina is going up a level, Chachma is going up a level, and Chachma goes to its essential source, which is the inner interiority of Keser, which is the Hiskalus of Pnimius Chachma, Pnimius Ta'atik, that when you go deep into the secret of Chachma, when you dig down deep into the bittul of Chachma, what a person is going to come to find is the inner interiority of Keser, which allows Chachma to extend itself beyond its kind of framework of functioning and to break free from the barrier and express itself downwards as well. And so Chachma is rooted in the inner interiority of Keser, and that's the Or Zila, that's the Or Yud that's revealed on Shabbos. Dahave kahar tabur v'har tavur kamehave arbe parse umeshacha tzavare tlasa parse. And this antelope was as big as har tabur, which was the length of, it was the width of 4 parsos, and the elongation of its neck, I'm sorry, it was the height of 4 parsos, and the elongation of its neck was 3 parsos. So we see that this light of Chachma, this light that's Meskala on Shabbos Kodesh, is referred to as Har Tabor. So let's see. Roim kan soid shel dalid v'gimel. We see that Har Tabor has the measurements of dalid and gimel, 4 and 3. Umeramis al kama and yanim. And these two measurements represent a number of things. Number one, it hints to the secret of achilas dag b'Shabbos Kodesh, the need to eat fish on Shabbos Kodesh. Misha oichel dag biyom dag yitzol midag. That somebody, Chazal tells us, who eats fish, which is dalad gimel, on the seventh day, which is 3 plus 4, dalad plus gimel, which is 7, is going to be saved from the worry which comes from the root of dag, also daga, from the seventh millennia. So there's an orientation towards eating fish on Shabbos because Shabbos is this reflection of the 4 and the 3 being unified together. That's the secret of the oinig of Shabbos. The oinig of Shabbos, which is rooted in Chachma. Simcha is rooted in Bina, as we said. It's the desire to have fulfillment, which is rooted in an awareness of my current deficiency and the perpetual yearning after Shleimus. That's the Simcha of Bina. But the Oinig of Shabbos is the bittul. It's opposite from Simcha. Simcha is the motivation to become more than I am. Oinig is to experience what I am in this moment in a state of fullness. And on Shabbos, there's a chiyuv of Oinig. And that the Oinig of Shabbos is totally in the light of Chachma. As we explained elsewhere, says the Rebbe, the Shita of Rav Moshe Ashkenazi, the son of the Beis Hillel, who brings this down in his Hagos on Sefer Beis Hillel, Yeridea, Siman Reish Yud Ches, Sif Katan Aleph, that he is of the opinion dag b'Shabbos kodesh oraisa, that according to this orientation of Shabbos as being rooted in Dalet and Gimel, we see that according to the sheet of the son of the Beis Hillel, there is a chiyuv de oraisa to participate in eating fish on Shabbos, because Shabbos, this Orzila Bar Yuma, has the measurement of 4 and 3, and so clearly the 4 and 3, the dag, is fundamentally connected to the light of Shabbos kodesh. V'tama alav hashulchan aruch harav, but the Balatanya asks Akasha in Kuntres Acharon Siman Reish Membeis Ois Dalid. V'chi dagim ksive bekrod. We see a necessity, a commandment to eat fish. That eating fish on Shabbos is going to be considered a da'oraisa. So Zak the Heilige Rebbe, the biur hapnimi. But the real explanation as to why the son of the Beis Hillel could feel that eating fish on Shabbos is of a da'oraisa level should b'divrei Kabbalah nitztavinu b'vikaras Shabbos oinik. That it's included, says the Rebbe, within the command of karas Shabbos oinig, because oinig is rooted in Chachma, and the Chachma has the measurements of Dalet and Gimel, which is reflective in the dag itself. So when a person partakes of the dag, they're actually being Mekayim a mitzvah of oinig Shabbos. The oinig is the secret of Chachma. It's a secret of bittul, not running, not chasing, but abiding where one is. And that's the or of moichin, that's the or of consciousness. It's not the or of yegia, it's the or of menucha kitov. And in order to awaken this menucha muchletes of the calmness of the sea of wisdom, a person wants to eat a fish, which are also creatures that rest calmly in the sea of wisdom. Masha'en kin biyom tov. This is very different than Yantif, which is not a time of chachma, but rather a time of bina. Shenitztavinu al simcha. There's a command towards simcha there. Simcha and oineg are two fundamentally different experiences. Simcha is rooted in bina. It is an awareness of deficiency rooted in the desire to become more than I actually am, which gives birth to the possibility of joy, but also the opposite of joy, as opposed to the oineg that comes about with the simplicity and the acceptance and the tamimus of all things without the desire to shift or change. Yantif is the bechina of bina, it's the bechina of simcha, and Shabbos is the bechina of chachma, it's the bechina of menucha. Masha'en kin biyantif, where there's no commandment to eat fish, and it's stavinu al simcha, we have to partake in a space of joy. Hari ein simcha ela bebasar behema shesimcha meramis al hargasha salev. When it comes to simcha, when it comes to awakening those gevuros, dag is not going to be enough. We need basar there, because that's where the intensification comes from. The blood of the animal and the blood of the heart meet each other. That's the bina, that's the lave. Natata simcha belibi, the place of joy is found within the heart itself. Shahalev hu bechinas chitzonius. The lave is the element of chitzonius in relationship to the mind. It's bina in relationship to chachma. It's yayin and basar in relationship to dag. It's not the inner interiority of calmness, but it's the externality of intensification and effort. The imkain, and therefore ba'inan bo yayin v'basar behema. On Yantif, when we're trying to spark the light of bina, which comes about by way of the gevuros and the intensification of the self through its processes in this world, so then a person needs yayin and basar shehema ma'achalam yoter chitzonium hamevim lahargasha simchat alev. Those are more externalized, thicker elements of physical pleasure and enjoyment, which brings about a simcha in the heart of the individual. Mashen ken on Shabbos, where it's a calmer simcha, it's a menuchas emes, and there we want to partake of the HaChochma, which is the secret of the dagim. V'chein la'aselavu, in the future, yaskala oiris v'sodis gedolim al yidei achilas halavyasan shu dag hagadol. And in the future, when everything ascends back up to a place of chachma, and bina is no longer going to be the fundamental functioning model, so then we're going to ascend back to the true Suda of the Lavyasan, which is the Dag HaGadol, which is representative of the Or HaChachma Ba'amisaso that's going to be Niskala. So we see that Har Tabor represents the shape or the size of the Orzila Bar Yuma, which is the light of Chachma that's Niskala on Shabbos, and it expresses itself by way of the Dag, by way of the Dalad Gimel, which is rooted in the Oineg of the Am HaChachma, as opposed to the Yagia of the Ayin and the Basar. Zok the Heilige Rebbe. There's another remes, v'chein merames hadalid v'hagimel, the measurements of 4 and 3, al hazayin margalin, on the 7 pearls, on the 7 gems that are megala within the Shechina, the kishutan de lehave, the beautification that is not present during the week, but that emerges on Shabbos. There are the 7 jewels, which are referred to in the Zohar Kadosh as the Dalid Osios of Eke, the 4 letters of Aleph K, Yud K, the Gimel Osios Yud He Vav. So the 4 letters of Eke and the 3 letters of Yud He Vav compose the 7 letters of the 7 Margalin, which are going to be the 4 plus the 3. Now the Rebbe is going to take us into a deeper level of understanding how the dag itself, how these measurements of 4 and 3, which mark the measurements of Har Tabor, which is the framing in which we can receive the Orzila Bar Yuma, the light of the Or Yud that is Niskala on Shabbos Kodesh, and every moment is ripe to reveal Shabbos Kodesh in our mind. And so the Rebbe is going to point now to a different way of looking at 4 and 3, rather than looking at 4 as being the Shem Eke and its Osios, and the 3 being Yud Ke Vav without the Malchus of the Shem Havaya. We're going to see it differently, because the 4 and the 3 represent the Shemos HaKlaliyim. They represent the general names that we are orienting ourselves to. When a person looks in the Siddur, when a person looks at a Siddur of the Rashash or a Siddur of the Arizal, when a person is contemplating the process of the light moving from above down below, so the light is going to be expressed in the Siddur as the Shemos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when a person is machaven on the Shemos HaMenukados, which is the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the Nekudos, which is light of Chachma, which is the Bittul B'Sharasha, as the Baal Tanya says, that the only way that a person can be Mamshech or Ein Sof is through Bittul itself. So when the Rashash instituted the need to print the Shemos Havayos HaMenukados and all of the Riboy Shemos of Havaya and Ekya in the Sidurim, it's so that a person is perpetually remembering that any kavana, any intentionality or attention or attempt to draw down shefar melamala is fundamentally rooted in the shemos havayos hamenukados, the shem havaya with the nekudos that reminds me that it's the chachma, which is the bittel, and that's what I'm drawing back down. And when we look in the siddur, you're going to see the shemos of eheke and the shemos of havaya underneath it, because the shemos of eheke, which are rooted in bina, are more of an or makif, and the shemos of havaya, which are the moichin of chachma, which settle in, that's going to be reflected in Havaya. So there are 4 permutations of the Shem Havaya that we utilize. Obviously, the Ramami Pano points out that we can have 12, 13. There's a number of different permutations that can be used, but Baruch Kadsho and Nivuaso, the Arizal, revealed that these were the 4 permutations that represent the sum totality of our experience in this Welt and the mechanisms and technologies, so to speak, through which we can access that which rests behind, within, above, around our world by contemplating the divine names in their their own permutations. That's the Shem Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben. The Shem Ab is Yud, Vav, Dalid, and then Hey, Yud, and then Vav, Yud, Vav, and then Hey, Yud. That's when you spell out the words, the letters with a Yud. That leads us to the gematria of 72, which is Chachma. Then we have Yud, Vav, Dalid, then Hey Yud, then Vav Aleph Vav, then Hey Yud, which is Aleph and Yudin, which is going to be the Shem Havaya of Sag, which is the gematria of 63. Then we're going to have the Iker Shem Havaya that we relate to, which is the gematria of 45, corresponding to Adam. That's when it's spelled out with an Aleph, Yud Vav Dalid, and then Hey Aleph, and then Vav Aleph Vav, and then Hey Aleph. And then we're going to have Mara Samachpela, the last permutation of the Shem Havaya, which is this the doubling of itself, which is Yud Vav Dalid, and then Hey Hey, and then Vav Vav, and then Hey Hey. So we have the four shemos of Havaya, the four permutations, Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben. And we also have, when it comes to the Shem Eke, which represents the name of Bina, we have three different permutations because in the Shem Sag, you have Yud and Aleph in Havaya, but you don't have that breakdown in Eheke. And so we have four shemos of Havaya and three shemos of Eke. The miluyim of Eke are going to be Kasa, Kamag, and Kana, because it's going to be Aleph, Lamed, Pei, Hey, Yud, and then Yud, Vav, Dalet, and then Hey, Yud. That's going to give us 161. Then we're going to have Aleph, Lamed, Pei, Hey, Aleph, Hey, Aleph, Yud, Vav, Dalet, Hey, Aleph, which is going to be Mile Alphen, which is Kuf Mem Gimel 143. And then we're going to have Shem Eke B'Miloi Heyin, which is going to be Aleph Lamed Pei, Hey, Hey, Yud, Vav, Dalet, Hey, Hey, which is the gematria of 151. So we have the four permutations of the Shem Havaya, Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben, and the three permutations of the Shem Eke, Kasa, Kamag, and Kana. And from these shemos, we see that there's seven shemos, Sheshemos HaKodesh HaElu, Him HaSheresh Yichud Kudshabarichu, these seven names ultimately represent the true unification of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shechina, the Elyonim and the Tachtonim that's being Niskala on Shabbos itself, which is the Or Zila, which is the Or Yud. And therefore, if it's the Or Yud and it's the Hiskalis of the Yichud and Shabbos Kodesh, so it makes sense why there's going to be 4 and 3 as the measurements, representative of Dag, representative of the 4 permutations of the Shem Havaya and the 3 permutations of the Shem Eka. And it's only going to be revealed in its fullness in the future. Ki yadua shehadalid miluye havaya hema hameichin da'aba hameirim b'pnimius hanukva. That, like we said, the 4 permutations of the Shem Havaya represent the light of Chachma that are meir down to Malchus, and the Gimel miluyim of the Shem Eke are the meichin of Bina that are meir down to the pnimius of Zer Anpin, as it's explained elsewhere in terms of the pasuk beside Abi Yisad Brata ve'isha ki tazriya v'yalda zachar. So here the Rebbe is bringing out a very important point, which rove of the Torah is built upon, especially when it comes to the Torah of the Baal Hasulam. And so we're going to just kind of go over a quick overview of the Nakuda so that we can understand what the Rebbe is telling us. B'derech klal, when we look at the Shem Havaya and the way that the Shem Havaya is broken down in accordance to the Partsufim, so the Yud is Chachma, that's the first instantiation of masculine expressivity in a pointed nature. Then the Hey is going to be the Bina, which is going to be the process of diminution and concealment for the sake of revealing that idea. It's the first instantiation of the Nukva. Then we have Vav, which is Zer Anpin, which is the second expression of masculinity, which is the drawing down the Shefa Lamata so that it can be Niskala within the last Hey of the Shem Havaya, which is Malchus, which is the second feminine principle. So we see that the Yud and the Vav represent Chachma and Zer Anpin. It's almost like it's the father and the son. And the first Hey and the second Hey represent Bina and Malchus, which is like the mother and the daughter. Now, externally, the relationship in terms of the Shem Havaya is that the Yud and the Vav are related to one another, and the Hey are related to one another because Matzah Minas Mino, the father and the son, and the mother and the daughter. But Bipnimius, the relationship is in truth separate from that, based on the pasuk Abba Yisad Brata v'Koinen Shemayim Betvuna. Abba, which is Chachma, is in truth the foundation of the daughter, which is Malchus, and Ima is miyased, the moichin of Zer Anpin. So in truth, the way that we look at the relationship is the Yud has its expression in the lowest Hey, and then the first Hey expresses itself within the Vav. So it's Chachma, and then Bina, and then Zer Anpin and Malchus, but Bipnimius, Chachma is going down to Malchus, and Bina is being mashpia into Zer Anpin, which is where the moichin come from. So we see that the real tachlis of Chachma itself is to be Megala and to be Matakin Malchus, the lowest place imaginable, because that's where the bittul is expressed, and the hisboinenus of Bina and the complications of Bina express themselves within the moichin of Zer Anpin. And what we see over here is that the Dalid Shemos Havaya of Chochma are Meir Lamata to Malchus, and the Gimel Havayos, the Gimel Miluyim of Eke, which are Shayach to Ima, are Meir themselves in Zer Anpin, as we're going to see. The Klalos HaShabbos Kodesh, and when it comes to Shabbos Kodesh, Shaboniya Yichud Kutchabrichu v'Knesses Israel, and then Shabbos Kodesh, when there's a revelation of the unity that's going to be revealed in the future between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael, which is the Yichud of Chachma and Bina, above and below. The way that this takes place is al yedei shemi'irim behem hashemos demilui havaya milui ekesh al yadam niyah yichud kutshbrichu, and that's why in the future this is going to be the revelation of the yichud, and that's why on Shabbos, which is a hitznaitzitz of the revelation of the yichud, there is this measurement of 4 and 3, which is revealed in the need and the necessity of eating fish, which is magala zayin on the secret world of chachma, because we're unifying the 4 and the 3, we're unifying the shemos of havaya and the shemos of ekeh. And the Rebbe continues and he says the goiva of the Orzila was Arba Parsa'e, Hamaram is Adal Milei Shemavaya. And like we saw in the first mimer of Rabba Bar Chana, that the height is associated with Chachma, the way that something descends down from above, and the width is going to be associated with Bina, which is the expansion and the application of the idea across various metaphors and different categorizations of the notion. So what we have is that the height is going to be the 4 Parsaos, which is going to be the Daled Milui Havaya, which correspond to the Moichin of Abba and Moichin of Chachma, because the Moichin of Abba and Chachma descend from the heights of the heights down to the depths of the depths, which is going to be Meir down to Malchus, like we said, but the Hispashtus Satzavar, but the width is going to be the width of the Gimel Parsaos, which are the Gimel Milu Eke, that go and extend themselves in the secret of Bina. So again, we see that Shabbos Kodesh represents the unification of Chachma and Bina. So Zakt the Heilige Rebbe. The Ayin B'Likut Maran Torah Nuntes. And here we're going to have a different orientation to the circle and the square that we saw last week. And over here, the circle and the square are going to still be Maramis to Shabbos Kodesh, but we're going to look at it from a different perspective. Rather than looking at it from the perspective of Chachma and Bina, like we did last time, where the square that had the circle within it was the secret of, the circle that had the square within it was in the secret of the Chachma that contains the Bina within it. So over here, we're going to see it oriented towards Zer Anpin and Malchus, and we'll see exactly what the Rebbe wants from us. So the Rebbe says that when it comes to the letters of Gimel and Dalid, so we have to look at Likutei Moharan Torah Nun Tes, which is the Torah of Heichel HaKodesh, where Rabbeinu Zal's Maram is Sham Gamkin Shor Shabbos Kodesh Or Shel Igul V'Ribua, that the secret of Shabbos is the secret of the circle and the square. Kedisa b'Zohar Kadosh, as it's written in the Zohar Kadosh, as Shabsoisai Tishmeru. Why is it Shabsoisai, the doubled nature of Shabbos? Shabsoisai da igula v'ribuya diligo. Shabsoisai is the secret of a circle with a square inside of it. A circle with a square inside of it. Shaha'igul v'haribuya hema oiris ha'mevatlam esarash ha'ayideh ha'oiris ha'elu nishave b'chinas Shabsoisai b'chinas igula b'rivua. Sagt the Heilige Reb Nachman, that the reason Shabbos is referred to as the circle with a square inside of it is that the secret of the circle and the square are the lights of Chachma and Bina that are mevatel, the negativity and the concealment, and it's specifically through these lights that the element of Shabsoisai, which is the Igula Biribua, is emergent. That is what Rabbeinu says in Torah Nuntes. And Zakta Heilige Rebbe Shlita, she'echad me'abiurim be'inyan zehu al pianis kaleel. One of the many ways to understand this, and the Rebbe is highlighting, there are many, many ways of looking at the same thing in Panemius HaKabbalah, and none of them are in argument with one another, but Hakol Tali Be'erchei HaKunuyim Bilvad. Everything is dependent upon the orientation and the position and the relative positioning of the sugya that's under discussion. So in accordance with what we're discussing until now, so this secret of the circle with the square inside of it, Shesoid HaShabbos Kodesh Hu Shahamiruba Shehu B'Bechinas Zah Nichnas L'Soicha Igul, which is the Bechina of the Nukva, which is the Bechina of Malchus. On Shabbos, the square, which is Zer Anpin, as Rabbeinu Zal points out, that the square reflects Mishpat, it represents the severity and the lawfulness of reality. Ribua Dam Mishpat, the square is Mishpat, it's judgment, which is associated with Zer Anpin and the typical order of functioning, and that's the din itself. That the square, which is typically higher than the circle, because Zer Anpin is typically higher than Malchus, on Shabbos it enters into the circle to reveal that it is mevutal itself within the Malchus itself. Because Rabbeinu explains that the Igul is the element of Malchus, V'roish Igul L'kisei, Shenemar al Kisei HaKavod, that the Kisei HaKavod, which is the place of Malchus, is referred to as having a circular top, that the Kisei HaKavod is the element of the Nukva and the element of Malchus. So we see on Shabbos there's a process in which Zer Anpin is revealed to be actually functioning within Malchus itself, and that Malchus is revealed to be higher. The Emunah is revealed to be higher than the knowledge. Shabbos Kodesh and Shabbos Kodesh Niskala or Ha'elyon. This is rooted in the light of the future that's going to be revealed. That allows for the unification between above and below, between our orientation and Emunah itself. Shenichna Samaruba, that the square which represents Zer Anpin and the measurements and the severity. And again, we said that the square is related to Zer Anpin and the measurements, that the square itself shines within the circle, which is the Shechina. Meruba go igula. It's the square within the circle, which is an undoing of the typical hierarchy, which is taking place on Shabbos in the secret of Eishes Chayla Taras Baila, in the secret of Nekeva Toseviv Gever. V'zesoid kois hakidush hayu manhagim la'asos hakois betzuras meruba go igula l'rames al sod hayichud. And this is why so many kiddush cups back then were made in accordance with this same shape, which was that the shape of the cup would be a square with a circle, a square within a circle, highlighting the secret of Zer Anpin being surrounded by Malchus in the Hisayrus of the Geula that was going to take place through the lens of Shabbos Kodesh. And we're going to see now, the Rebbe brings down how the shapes of Shabbos, which is going to be the square of Zer Anpin within the circle of Malchus, is also going to correspond to the roots of each of them in Chochma and Bina. And Zakta Heilige Rebbe, Merum Hasham B'divrei Rabbeinu Zal Soid Hanel. And also it's hinted to over there in the secret of Rabbeinu that the Zer Anpin, which is the Meruba, which is the orientation towards stricture and order, which is the square, which is typically higher during the week, it's mekabel hamoichin de ima shehu bebechinas arbaim. The reason that Zer Anpin is referred to as the square is because it's receiving its moichin from Bina. Like we said, that the inner level is that Bina is mashpia down to Zer Anpin, and therefore Zer Anpin is receiving its moichin from Bina, which is the arbaim lebina, and therefore it is being mashpia down lamata in the form of a square. V'zesod haribua, this is the secret of the square, shu betsuras hamem. It's in the secret of the mem, which is the gematria of 40, which is Zer Anpin receiving its moichin from Bina. But the nukva, which is the circle, mekabelas hamoichin da abit, receives the light from Abba shu b'chinas shishim, which is the secret of 60. Because really, Chochma is mashpia lamata down to Malchus. B'china shishim hema Malchus, that we see that there's a number 60 associated with Malchus as well. It's the gematria of Hine, as the Ramchal says, that which is present, that which is here right now. Hine kel Yeshua Sisha shishim hem b'chinas ora Chochma meir lemalchus. That the 60, which is associated with the Zeh Shakana Chochma, is miskala down to Malchus, which is the circle. And the b'china of the Zaken, Zeh Shakana Chochma. Shezaken al pi Arizal hu ben shishim. Everything that we've been discussing until now, the circle and the square of Zer Anpin, which is receiving from Bina, which is the 3 miluyim of Shem Eke, and the circle, which is the Dalid, which is going to be the secret of the Malchus, which is Makabel, from Chachma. That's the Gimel and the Dalid. Those are the measurements which also give us the reality of the dag, the need to eat the dag on Shabbos. That the Igul is the Gimel that's Makif, the Dalid, which is the Meruba. The circle is the 3, which surrounds the square, which is the 4. Kemoba Orzila Didan, just like we find in this Orzila by this one-day-old antelope, Shahat Savar Shu Gimel Parsahu Igul, that its neck, which is 3 parsaos, is a circular structure. V'hume al gufa Orzila Shu Dalid Parsa, and it's above and beyond the body of the Orzila, which is actually the 4 parsaos, which is the bechina of the Meruba. And so we see that on Shabbos, in the light of the Orzila Bar Yuma, in the light of the Hisgalus of Chochma B'Pnimiyuso, what we're going to see is that Malchus itself is going to be the thing that surrounds Zer Anpin. And there's going to be the Yichud of the circle, which is Malchus, receiving from Chochma, that contains the square, which is receiving from Bina. And those are the measurements of the 4 and the 3, which are associated with the light of Shabbos Kodesh. V'hartabur kama have arba parsai u'mishacha de tzavare gimel parsai. And the Rebbe is going back into the shiurim to help us come to the place of understanding the nekuda. V'yesh l'ramis oid bazeh. There's something else to hint over here. Gam al Torah de la'asid Torah de atika stima. That this revelation of the 4 and the 3, this dag, the Orzila Bar Yuma, this ore that is cheapened in our eyes nowadays, because it's not yet time for it in the future. It represents the Torah de la Asalava da Atika Stima'a, the revelation of the ancient Torah, which is the chibur between the Luchos Rishonos and the Luchos Shnios. Shehine yoidim dever Chazal. We know the words of Chazal. Shel Har Tabor ba shetinasin ba Torah. Har Tabor was a mountain that wanted the Torah to be given on it. It was the biggest mountain. It was a lashon of Shvira. It broke everything else. But Har Sinai, the place of Anava, was the place that the Torah was received. Ubachar Hashem b'Har Sinai, but Hashem chose Har Sinai and not Har Tabor because of its anava. But we can say, says the Rebbe, when it comes to the Matan Torah that we received, which was only the externality of Keser, which is rooted in Bina, in the secret of Arich Anpin, that's the place of Anava, that's the place of Leah, Ekev Anava, Yiras Hashem. And when that Torah was given over to us, the revealed level of the Torah, it was given over in the Anava and the Bittel of the keser of arich, which is the hanhaga of what we have nowadays. She'arich bechinas anava. Arich, which is rooted in Bina, is the element of Anava. Torah de la Asilavo. But when it comes to the revelation of the Torah of Atikas Tima, which is hinted to within the Mamrim of Rabba Bar Chana, which is why Rabbi Nachman, who is coming to the world to be Megala, a Torah of Atikas Tima, starts off with the Torah of Rabba Bar Chana because it's the Yichud of Chochma and Bina together. In the future, Tiyah Bechinas Har Tabor, Kamesha Haisa Machshav Litin Torah Har Tabor. In the future, we're not going to need only the Keser of Arich, which is rooted in the Anava of Har Sinai, but there's going to be a Heskalis of the Ani de Kedusha, the Gaiva de Kedusha, like Rabbeinu reveals to us in his writings, like the Heligat Tzadikim of Rizhin, Ani Oimer, like Rabba Bar Chana says, Chazili, I saw this. There's an orientation to be ne'etak from the Darga of Arich, from the highest level of the lower level, to ascend to the lowest level of the higher level, which is the Torah of Atikas Tima'a, which demands a Gaiva de Kedusha. Shekola Machshava Shemilatchatchila Mitkayemas Besof. We know that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to carry out, even though it wasn't carried out in the time that it was desired to be carried out, it will be carried out in the future. Meaning to say that the desire to give the Torah on Har Tabor in its grandiosity is something that's going to be niskayim la'asalavo. Sha'atorah de la'asalavo b'chinas atik, because when it comes to the Torah of la'asalavo, it's not any longer going to be rooted in arich, which is the keser of the lower level, which is rooted in the bina that's mashpia to zer anpin, but rather it's going to be the Torah of atikas tima'a, which is the gaiva de kedusha, which takes place when there's a zichuch of the ani through the bittul of chachma, which is rooted in the circle of chachma and malchus. That in the future the Torah HaKadosh is going to be given in the element of atik, shabavchinas gaiva de kedusha, in the element of a holy egoism, a holy sense of self. That we are going to cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the secret of the Hiskalus of Atikas Tima'a that took shape at Kriyas Yamsuf, and it's going to be a song of Ki Ga'o Ga'a. It's going to be a song of pride. She'heir b'Kriyas Yamsuf ha'aras atik. At Kriyas Yamsuf, there was a need for Klal Yisrael to take on their true form and the strength and the Mesiras Nefesh available to them. As it's written elsewhere, beside Re'iyas v'Tmunas Hashem Yabit shezachu l'Kal Yisrael b'Kriyas Yamsuf, zeh keli v'amveyu mar be'etzva v'emer zeh kavyachol. Each and every person was zeichet to the darga of Moshe Rabbeinu at that level, which is the Ani de Kedusha, where he was able to say v'anachnu ma, because his anoichias was mevuta b'tachlis as a result of the Chachma b'Sharasho and the secret of Minamayim. That's what's going to be revealed to everybody else in the future, and that's hinted to in Shabbos in the secret of the Hisairus, of the Hisgalus, of the Torah of Atikas Tima'a, which is the secret of the Chachma that's mashpia down to Malchus, and the secret of the circle that contains the square within it, which is the Torah that we have nowadays of Arach Anpin, which is where Bina is mashpia down to Zer Anpin. Zak the Heilige Rebbe, Ubahar Tavor, but when it comes to Har Tabor, Shu or de La'asid, when it comes to the light of the future, Hare Ha'igul Me'al Haribua, in that place the Ani, the Malchus, is going to be bigger than the square, which is the Zer Anpin, even though nowadays we operate in the perspective where the Zachar is higher than the Nekeva, because Hashpa'a is bigger than Kabbalah, because in Kabbalah there's a fear that a person is going to come to think Ani HaGever, and there's a fear of the egoism inherent within it. But in the future, when there's no fear, because there's going to be a Zichuch HaAmiti of the sense of self rooted in the Sharish of Chochma and the secret of Abi Yisai Brata, so then in the future we don't have to be so afraid, and there's going to be a transference of the value, and it's going to be Eishas Chayla Taras Baitla. Avada, there's going to be an inner interiority of Zer Anpin that's always above and beyond the light of Malchus, but we first have to come to see that Malchus is higher than Zer Anpin, so that we can come to reaffirm that Zer Anpin is higher than Malchus, Ad Ein Sof Mamish. Ella. So the Rebbe says, V'lo yikamei b'Torah da'ata. Right now, the Torah doesn't operate that way. The eagle is lower than the square. We operate nowadays with a circle within a square rather than what will take place in the future, which is going to be the square within the circle. Because the Torah nowadays, which is the secret of the meruba, me'al ha'igul, whereas their anpin and the square and the orientation of the structured nature of all things operates in a higher place than the equality of the circle itself, meaning to say that lima Torah is chashuva me'ata me'tfila, that Torah learning seems to be more valuable than tefillah at this point. Kedechazin and shemisha Torasu umnaso in posek letvila. Haraya is that someone who operates within the place of Torah umnaso, they're pater from tefillah. Ela b'Torah de la'asid, but in the future, gufa or zila sheb'chinas avaksha bo yub'chinas meruba, that the guf of the orzila, which is the element of the vak and the zer anpin, and the way that we typically function, which are the arba parsaos, but the eagle is going to be higher. The eagle is going to be higher and it's going to be revealed to be surrounding that which is the square, which is the body of the Orzila itself. From the perspective of the future, ha'igul hu harosh, the secret of the circle, the secret of malchus, that's makabel from chochma, which is the bittul, is higher than the square, which is their anpin, that's makabel from Bina, because we come to the place of Bittul Ha'amiti. We come to the absolute place of Bittul Ha'amiti and searching out for those lofty lights of Chachma and the Bittul Ha'elyon. She'oires HaChochma, that the lights of Chachma Tehei, She'ehema B'chinas Ha'igel, that there is going to be the light of Chachma, which is the element of the circle, which is mashpia down to Malchus, Shemeir al Yadam or Hayichad Apasha to Elikid Chachma Barosh, at which point the Malchus is going to be the vessel necessary for revealing the true ascendancy of Chachma over Bina, which is the secret of the eagle that is higher than the square itself. So let's go weiter, because the Rebbe is going to continue to bring us down into the sugya. Ube Marbase Deresha, and the place where it rests its head, was a Parsa Upalga, was a measure of a Parsa Upalga, which hints to the fact that there's a Kaiser and Peleg Kaiser, that there's Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. She'afilu she'amarnu she'b'Torah dila asilavo ha'or ha'chigava hu'or ha'chachma shu'or Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the light of the Yichud that's mayor within the pnimius of the Nukva. Mikol makom ze rak b'pnimius. When we speak of this ascendancy of the future, where there's going to be an ascendancy of the feminine above the masculine, and there's going to be an ascendancy of the emuna of Malchus, rooted in the bittul of Chachma, above the orientation towards the rigidity of the Torah of Zer Anpin, which is rooted in Bina. Even though we speak of the ascendancy of the avodah of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the seeking out of this radical bittul on the level of Chachma, it's going to be higher than the avodah of Mashiach ben David, which is the orientation of trying to continuously be doing the thing in the right way. And again, this orientation to Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef can obviously be switched and transferred depending again on the erech that we're looking at. But in the way that the Rebbe was drawing down the biur on this Maimer Chazal, which becomes the Hagdara through which we look at the sugya, we're looking at the perspective right now where Mashiach ben Yosef is connected most intensely to Chachma, because the Yesod is Mushrosh and Chachma, and the secret of the fact that the Kav HaEmtsai is noite to the Yamin al Yidei, the Koyach of Chachma, and Mashiach ben Yosef wants to bring us from Malchus back up to Chachma, the Tzafnas Paneach, the Galia Masechta, the one who is Megala his limud, as opposed to David HaMelech, who's not Megala Masechta, as opposed to David HaMelech, who's operating in the place of the avoida of Hariula Hashem Kol Haaretz, of the Malchus, of the Torah and the Kiyum of the halacha of it all. So what the Rebbe says is as follows: that even though in the future we're going to see there's a light of Chachma, which is the or of Mashiach ben Yosef, even though it's going to be higher, that's only going to be on the inner level of things. That's not going to be the shift explicitly on an external level. Because just as we see in the future, Kamaisha Amar Hashem Yisbarach Li'Yeravim V'Nevat, Aniva Atu Ben Yishai Natayel Began Eden, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yeravim ben Nevat, who represented the secret of Mashiach ben Yosef, that him and David HaMelech and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are going to be Matayel in Gan Eden, revealing the unity of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the element of Yeravim ben Nevat, or the potential towards being Mashiach, and Mashiach ben David, which is Mashiach ben David, the secret of the unity of Chachma and Bina. So what Yeravim ben Nevat says, Mi Barosh, but who's going to be revealed? who's going to be revealed more explicitly, because Mashiach ben Yosef still wants to have that hisgalus bepnimius, but the danger is that if Mashiach ben Yosef is niskala bepnimius in the bittul hamuchletes of Chochma that's mashbiya down the mata, then God forbid a person can come to forget about the significance and the fundamental significance of the hanhaga of Zer Anpin and Bina, which is rooted in the malchus of David HaMelech, which is the responsibility of Hariyul Hashem Kol Haaretz and the perpetual, consistent guarding necessary in terms of the minutia of day-to-day experience. And so Yeravim ben Nevat was not ready to be mevatel himself, and he wanted his ascendancy to be revealed. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, it's not time for that yet. Kamosha Amar Hashem Yisbarach Yeravim ben Nevat, Shahaya She'im Haya Chayzer Haya Mashiach ben Yosef, as Ramchal says. Had Yeravim ben Nevat done tshuva, he would have been the element of Mashiach ben Yosef. Hashem says, Ani va'ata v'benishai natayel b'Gan Eden. Me, you, and David HaMelech, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach Tzidkenu are going to be natayel b'Gan Eden. Sha'ata, meaning to say you, Yeravim ben Nevat, Mashiach ben Yosef, you come before ben Yishai. You come before Ben Yishai. In truth, in the future, the circle is going to encircle the square. The square is not going to contain the circle. Or the yichud that's neskala with the light of Yosef Atzadik and the safnas paneach and the yisoid that's oilet to panemius chacham panemius atik is going to be of a higher level than the avoida and the yagia and the getting the hands dirty with the blood, trying to be matayir isha laba'ala that Mashiach ben David was involved in. The bittul muchatas of Yosef Atzadik is going to be seen as a higher level than Mashiach ben David. But nevertheless, but when Yeravim ben Nevat tried to ask explicitly about the orientation now, who's going to be ahead, who's going to be shown to be the head, Amar le Kadosh Baruch Hu ben Yishai berosh. Ben Yishai is the rosh, because we know, as we already saw, but Makom harosh, there's place for two tefillin of Rashi and tefillin of Rabbeinu Tam, the tefillin of Bina and the tefillin of Chachma. Shebechinas hagiloi hu bechinas Makom hanachas roishesh k'shechoichev ala karka. So this question of Yeravim ben Nevat, of who's going to be the Rosh represents the place of the Hisgalus of the Geula. That's what we're referring to over here with the place that the Orzila is able to rest its head. Makom hanachas roishe k'sheshoichev ala karka. That's mi barosh. Who's going to be revealed at the tippy top when it comes to the Giloi. She'etzem hayichud nikra shchiva ala karka. That when it comes to the essential unity that is revealed between the train Mashiachin and between the yichud of Kudsha b'Richa v'Shchintei is referred to as lying on the ground, as the Zohar HaKadosh says, that it's better to lie on the bare floor in a place of love rather than to lie in the most beautiful palaces and with the most comfortable blankets and mattresses in a place that doesn't have the orientation to love. So in this place of the Shchiva ala Karka, the resting on the floor, which represents the full Yichud, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Yeravim ben Nevat that Mashiach ben Yosef is not going to be Barosh. He represents the fundamental mission, but nevertheless, it's never going to be able to be revealed as being the essential mission, because then we'll forget about the other part of the mission, which is the avodah of Mashiach ben David, which is the avodah of the birurim and the clarification and the halacha. Shiyared harosh lahashpia al malchus shenikra karka. In the time of Gilui, in the time of Yichud, the rosh, the keser, kuchabrichu, is mashpia lamata to malchus the shchina, which is referred to as karka. Ubebechinas eskalis hayichud v'hahashpa b'chitzonius alam hariyah bechinas parsa v'palga. That when it comes to the external nature in which the nation is going to be receiving the lights of Mashiach Tzidkenu, in truth, it's going to be the element of Parsa V'Palga. It's going to be the measure of 1.5 Parsaos, which represents the Kesar and the Palgi Kesar, which represents the Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, as the Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us on Daf Samech Ches Amud Beis, which is the element of the Kaiser and the half Kaiser, which is Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, meaning to say that even though in the inner interiority of things, the light of Mashiach ben Yosef, the light of the circle is higher than the square, Dahainu da'afta b'pnimius, in the inner interiority, b'shorish Mashiach ben Yosef, and the source of Mashiach ben Yosef, and the secret of the Yichud Gavoya mi Mashiach ben David, that Mashiach ben Yosef is rooted in Chachma, Mashiach ben David is rooted in Bina, and therefore Mashiach ben Yosef represents a higher level of Bittul Muchletes, with the recognition that I don't have to do anything. Nevertheless, David HaMelech is the secret of limud v'darchei tshuva v'avoida, the need to perpetually return in the revealed ways of functioning. Mikol makom biyurida ela karka, when it comes to the revelation of unity, lehiskalas ela am, for it to be revealed to the Jewish people themselves, for them to be able to grasp the unity. Ye have ben David barosh, even though ben Yosef is barosh, even though Yeravim ben Nevat is included and to be revealed as a higher level, which is the secret of the yud within David. When you spell out David Shalem Dalid Vav Yud Dalid, it's the hint of the secret of Mashiach ben Yosef as existing within Mashiach ben David. But in the end of the day, Bechitzonius Hadavarim, ben David is always going to be Barosh. The Vak is always going to be Barosh. The Torah Kedosha, as we grasp it nowadays, is always always going to be grasped berosh. The hanhaga of mishpat is always going to be there to meet us at the next darga that we ascend to, even after we break the previous level of hanhagas mishpat. Shemitzad ha'or gavoa, from the perspective of the highest light, which is the bechina of or ha'chachma v'hayichud. Yes, avada b'pnimius Mashiach ben Yosef Yeravam ben Nevat is of a higher level. Ach mitzad heskalus hakelim b'chutz l'Klal Yisrael. But when it comes to revealing vessels for Klal Yisrael to be able to function, miskal zois hahipuch. It's revealed in a separate way. Shetzarach koidem l'lamid l'bnei Yisrael darchei ha'aveda v'tshuva shel Mashiach ben David. You can't start off with the yichud ha'amiti and the bittul muchletes of Chachma and Malchus that Mashiach ben Yosef represents. When it comes to avodah, we have to start off with the development of the kelim and the halacha, which is the avodah of Mashiach ben David mitzad hasmol, which is where Bina is mashpia down to Zah. V'chein milamid David HaMelech hasaderach shmiras ha'halacha. Shenemar al David. David HaMelech teaches the path that we have to start with the minusha of halacha. We have to start with the Hariyula Hashem kol haaretz and Hakala, which is the osios of halacha, that Hashem imo, Hashem is with him, shahalacha kamoisa b'chol makom. That even though in the inner interiority of the Yichud Yerav ben Nevat, you're right, that Mashiach ben Yosef, which represents the circle of Chachma that's mashpia down to Malchus and the Bitul Muchlates, you're right, that's the true Giloy. That's the Giloy of Orzila Bar Yuma. That's the Giloy of Shabbos Kodesh. But nevertheless, when it comes to the actual Hiskalis of Mi Barosh, so that the nation can receive it in a functional way, it's going to be David HaMelech, because the Shmiras HaHalacha and the need for the Minusha and the Diktuk and the Shmir HaHalacha are the secret of the Kalim, says the Rebbe. The vessels, HaNitzrachim Kadei LeKabbalas HaOr. There needs to be the vessels of David Malka Mashiach in order to receive the light of Mashiach ben Yosef. V'chein Milamdam as Derech HaTzvila. David HaMelech also taught the path of Tzvila, which is the path of Yegia, which is the path of work and the necessity of working through things. Shekol zehu b'soid binyan hakelim hagadolim. David HaMelech, this light of David, this light of the bina that's mashpiyat, the zer anpin, the square within the circle, it reveals the necessity of building vessels, big vessels, in order to draw down even bigger lights, especially ones that are strong enough to receive l'kablas or ayichad hagavoa v'ha'ne'elam yoted de Mashiach ben Yosef, especially lights, vessels that are going to be significant enough and strong enough to maintain and to hold the illumination of Mashiach ben Yosef. The imkain begiloi, and therefore when it came to the revelation of things, Mashiach ben David ba barosh. Mashiach ben David is going to be shown to be the one who is at the forefront. Lahachsir mekoidem es b'nei Yisrael b'tshuva. So we see, and that's where Yeravam ben Nevat was not able to hold this. Yeravam ben Nevat was not able to understand this. The fact that, yes, in spite of the fact that Mashiach ben Yosef holds the true secret of La'asad Lavo, that it's going to be the Bittul HaMuchlekas and the Menucha of the Chachma that's Megala within Malchus, and the secret of Yeravam ben Nevat, who's also going to be Matayel and Gan Eden. But when Yeravam ben Nevat asking me Barosh, he's asking who's going to be Barosh Gilo, who's going to be the external face of the matter. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him that it's David HaMelech, Yeravam ben Nevat is not able to handle that. Why? Because David HaMelech, the Avodah of Bina and Zer Anpin, is always going to need to precede the Avodah of the Bittul Muchletes, because if we start with the Oiris HaMerubim without vessels, then it's Shviras HaKelim. A person needs to build vessels in order to draw the Kelim down. This is the Iker Tachlis of the Rebbe's Ma'amarim here, to teach us the unity between Chachma and Bina, between Oiris and Kelim, between Riboy and Miut, between Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. That's what we're trying to do here. Zak the Heilige Rebbe. Verama kupta v'saver le'yardana. And this Orzila goes to the bathroom and it blocks up the Yarden. And again, the Rebbe is continuing with why it is that Sof Davar Kol Nishma, even if B'pnimius Hadavar Yeravam ben Nevat, Mashiach ben Yosef, the Avoid of Bittul HaMuchletes, which is a circle that contains a square within it that undoes the hierarchy, even though that is revealed to be a higher level on the inner interiority of things, nevertheless, in order to ensure the continuity of a system that operates in accordance with checks and balances and the sense and the semblance of Bechira and Yegia, which is the Iker Tachlis, so we have to start off with the Avoid of Mashiach ben David, which is the Binyan of Kalim. Shazeh Bir Lahanal. So this Gemara that goes on and it says that the Orzila goes to the bathroom and it blocks up the Yarden River. This is the Totsa'ah of everything we just discussed. Meaning, Madua be'inyan hakelim yesh lahaktim tikun de Mashiach ben David shu tikun hakelim lifnei haskalis de or de Mashiach ben Yosef. Why is it that when it comes to building the vessels, which is the work that we're doing nowadays, which is the work of preparing ourselves to be the vessels that are worthy of receiving the light of redemption, why is it that we first and foremost start with the work of Mashiach ben David, which is the binyan of the Kalim, and only then do we enter into the hasaga of the oirus of Mashiach ben Yosef? Adrabah, Ibcha Mastabra, start with the light and then build the vessels. That would be theoretically more exciting. That was Yeravam ben Nevat's shaila. Shahalo yesh sakana deriboy oires lifnei tikun hakelim. But the reason is that there's a danger of riboy or prior to the development of vessels. Riboy or is when there is too much light that does not find the receptacle that can hold it in a functional way in the day-to-day typical functioning of a person in this world. A person needs kalim. If there's no kalim, there's riboy or, and that's shviras hakelim. That's the secret of the shvir, where there's too much light that goes down and it shatters the vessels, and as a result of that, there's the PTSD of the spiritual lostness. Shehayamachmis riboy haor leloy kalim. One of the reasons for the shvir was that there was too much light and not enough vessels. It was the light of Mashiach ben Yosef and hashpa'a prior to the light of David Malka Mashiach, which is the development of vessels. Shu soid shvira, the secret of the shattering. Shayamachmis riboy or leloy kalim. Ulachain, and therefore ha'or de la'asid, which is the light of the rectification in the future, which is the orzila bar yuma, which is the light of or yud that's miskala on that day of Shabbos, which is the or shehu zol hayom, the light that is cheapened nowadays. She efshar laleches bo hayom, that we can't walk in accordance with that light because of its greatness. Shah Hashem ganaz raklet tzadikim, that Hakadosh Baruch Hu hid this great light of Mashiach ben David, this orzila, the or yud, that secret of the circle that contains the square. Hakadosh Baruch Hu hid it away. She yechelim lichanis laor haganus hazeh, that a person should be able to enter into this hidden light of Mashiach ben Yosef. Ach l'stam b'nei adam shalei nigmru tikkun hakelim, but for most people, the Am themselves, which is where the revelation that Rav Yeravim ben Avat was asking about, not Rav Yeravim ben Avat, that Yeravim ben Avat was asking about, that has to do with the tikkun hakelim, and that's what everyone has to start with. The avoid the Mashiach ben David, shari im nichnasim be'or zeh, that if a person were to enter in straight to the light without the development of vessels, then there's going to be a great shattering. And then it becomes almost like this riboy orus, which is the exemplified in the Orzila, just kind of going to the bathroom and blocking up the Nahar Yarden, which is referred to as the Yarden de Kedusha, the Hasaga that we can have, which is again the Rebbe saying why it has to be that Mashiach ben David, the Bir HaKelim, has to come before Mashiach ben Yosef, and in Avoida level, which is the Hiskalis of the Iris. Shabamakom Shahamalchus, which is the Yarden. When the Malchus is Makabel, Chayis, Me'or Haganuz, Hari Lemisha Ein Lo Tikkun HaKelim. If a person is not prepared their kelim properly in the secret of tshuva and the tikkun of avodah, which is the avodah of Mashiach ben David, then the riboy oros is going to clog up the yarden. It's going to be too much, and it's going to break it. This tsoa, this that's blocking up the yarden, this waste of the animal that's blocking up the yarden, is now being referred to as this profound light of oiros that don't have kelim in order to draw them down in a healthy way. V'im kein ha'etza, what is the clear, specific direction? Kanizkal el lahakdim tikun hakelim de Mashiach ben David lefnei ha'oires v'hareiyah v'hayichad de Mashiach ben Yosef. That even though Yeravim ben Nevat, you're right, the avodah Mashiach ben Yosef brings us to a higher level of bittul muchletas within the Chachma shebechol davar, which is rooted in the pnimius of Chachma, which is the pnimius of Atik, which is the place of the chen, the kedusha, the yeshus, the kedusha, where a person doesn't have to do much. First and foremost, we have to go through the process of bittul muchatas, the secret of shmiras halacha, the secret of being mevatel our das to our rebbeim, in order to develop the kelim of Mashiach ben David, in order to draw down the lights of Mashiach ben Yosef. So although this orzila, which represents the circle with the square within it, it represents the aliyah of malchus, which is rooted in chachma, above and beyond zer anpin, which is rooted in bina, nevertheless, that's only a hiskalus and a hitznaitzitzus of that which will happen in the future. But for now, in spite of the fact that that light is more potent and that light of Yichud is more potent, nevertheless, we have to go into the perspective of David Malka Mashiach, which is the binyan hakelim, so that we can receive that light, which is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Yeravim ben Nevat, Mi barosh ben David barosh, because that's what's necessary. ועל זה מחדש הרשב"ם שאמנם כל ירידה ושבירה זה רק לפי שעה עד דמסמסהו המים מעט מעט. The Rashbam explains that this dung of the animal that's kind of blocking up the Yarden, in truth, it's only for a moment, because eventually the water is going to slowly but surely push it away. And what the Rebbe is pointing out here is that even though we've just expressed that there's the necessity of building kalim prior to receiving the Oris so that a person doesn't experience a shira, well, let's say a person doesn't know this, and let's say a person follows the path of Yeravim ben Nevat, trying to live with the light of Mashiach ben Yosef, Not the path of Rav and Benevat in terms of the Avodah Zarah, God forbid, but rather the assumption and the question of Mi Barosh, why shouldn't the Avodah of Bittul Muchletes and what's revealed on Shabbos be the way that I function normally? If I know the secret, why not live in accordance with the secret? So the Rebbe says that really, in truth, even if a person goes the wrong way and they start off with Riboy Oros and they start off with the Avodah of Mashiach ben Yosef, nevertheless, that blockage that they cause to the Yarden, that the Riboy Oros causes, nevertheless, that's also going to have a tikkun because everything is going to be mitikun. Sha'af mi shahalach b'derech mute'es shel zeh. Even a person who walked in the wrong way of walking, which is drawing down Hiradas or Lifnei Atikun Akelim, drawing down the light prior to the rectification of vessels, the Avodah of Mashiach ben Yosef prior to the Avodah of Mashiach ben David, Ad Shaniya Mizachas V'Shalom B'china Shvira Shu Hatalis Re'e V'Skiras Hayarden, that which is the element of the breaking of the vessels and the stopping up of the Yarden through the feces of the animal. Nevertheless, nevertheless, if a person's intentionality is ultimately about connecting themselves to light, we know that any shira that takes place as a result of a positive orientation, even if it's a misguided one, is only a momentary breakage that will find refinement through the process of the birurim and the aliyos and the processing and the tshuva. Nevertheless, the waters of the Yarden, which are the waters of Malchus, the waters of the revealed Torah with the very basic sense of accepting the yoke of heaven, slowly but surely it will fix the shira of the Riboy Oros and it will give that person kalim in order to draw kalim into their lives to hold that light. And the shattering of the vessels with the Riboy Oros will in truth be for the sake of an aliyah afterwards, because the light that's drawn down into Malchus is going to be revealed within Kalim themselves. That any of the mistakes that we make, which are very often just the attempt to draw down Ribo Oros without Kalim, attaching ourselves to Avodah of Mashiach ben Yosef prior to the Avodah of Mashiach ben David, and that's the danger. All of it is going to be fixed through the waters of the Yarden, through the Yared Nun, through the illumination of the Nun Sharibina that are mezachech and clarifying to all things. Everything is going to be fixed. Everything is going to be fixed in the secret of V'yitukan Akol V'yit Mases B'zarakti Alecha Mayim Tahirim B'ord the Shabbos Kodesh B'ord the Asad Lavo Sheyaskala Be'ezras Hashem. And so once we see that taking Chachma in its highest place, without first and foremost developing the vessels necessary to hold it, is going to be a riboy oros that can cause a shvira. Nevertheless, even though it can cause a shvira and it can block up the yarden, nevertheless, there will be an eventual zichuch as a result of the mayim of the yarden, which is the yared nun, which is the bina, and the giloi b'chitzonius of the avoida of Mashiach ben David, the birur hahalacha, and the prate pratiyim, that will come along and be mezachich that soa to move it out and to allow the lights to find the vessels and there to be a tikkun. But we see that this soa, this excess, this surplus, this waste that is too much and it doesn't have a place to go to the degree that it can block things up is referred to as the tsoa, and it's also referred to as the loftiest level of being masig, the orus of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the Chochma b'sharasho, without bringing it down into Kalim. And this, the Rebbe says in Osir Aleph, is Rama Kufta v'sachar leili Yardana. This orzila, this illumination of the Torah adla asilavo, where the shirish of Chachma and the Malchus is revealed to be higher than the Bina and the Zer Anpin, and the dangers inherent within that of Riboy Oros if we don't proceed with the work of being Mezachich the Kalim. This fear, this concern is referred to as the concern of the Tzoa that blocks up the Yarden. But Zak the Heilige Rebbe, Mavur b'chachmas bal hasulam. It's revealed in the Torah of the Bal Hasulam. Shetzoa b'sherish hasharashim hu megar de chachma lelo levushe habina kanelske la'el shahashvira me'oros kavoam lelo kelim. We're not going to go into it now because we don't have the clarification necessary for it yet. But the depth of the Bal Hasulam sugya is ultimately about how there's a gar de chachma, which is the shayrash ha'elyon of the oires ha'elyonim, which is the recognition that all we have to actually do is to be makabel amanas lakabel from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that we don't have to do anything. We don't need to go into the arida of Bina and the Yagia of the Seichel of Bina descending down into the realm of Torah Lishma in order to be Mashpia to Zer Anpin, which is the Ratzon Lahashpia Amanas Lakabel or the Ratzon Lahashpia Amanas Lahashpia. But really, we can operate in the place of the Ratzon Lakabel Amanas Lahashpia, which is the Yud of Chachma, and that can be Mezachich, the Hey Tachtoinu, which is Kabbalah Amanas Lakabel. That's the Garda Chachma, the loftiest lights. But because we don't have allowance to utilize those lofty lights yet, and there's the Garda Chachma that seems to be concealed, and there's a manola on it, there's a lock placed on it, and it's waiting for it to be revealed in an accessible way. Because the Garda Chachma is still without the levushay bina. We need the levushim of bina. We need the eke in order to be malbish the shem havaya so that it can come down in a reasonable way. But the garda chachma, which is the tsoa, which is the element of something that is so lofty that it has no place of value. It appears to be surplus. It appears to be extraneous. It's that place where Baal Pa'or wanted to be matakin, even that place, to show that they had an achiza of a place that's higher than us. It's what the Nachash was meant to be involved with. This sugya of Tsei Tomerlo, of the Tsoa itself, which is being referred to over here as the Rama Kupta V'Sachar Leliardana, it's the Pagam of the Garda Chachma without the Levushim of Bina, which is Riboy Oros without Kalim. And this is the secret of Sodom and Amorah. Sodom and Amorah, say the Bala Hasulam, were yonik, their koyach from the Garda Chachma, meaning there was a lofty, lofty light in these places. There was a lofty light of Ashirus, there was a lofty light of Shefa, Belid Dai, but there was no kalim of sharing it. There was no kalim of recognizing the necessity of tzimtzum and tzedakah. And this element of the tsawa of Baal Pa'or and Sodom and Amorah, they all draw their sustenance, but their klipa from the Garda Chachma, from Hagiloi Elikis Hachigavoa, from the highest level of divine revelation. The highest level of divine revelation and the secret of what Rabbeinu Zal explains in Tinyana Torah Yud Beis and Ayim Makom Kavoda, that the Makomas HaMetunafim are in truth yoinik, their koyach from the Maimer Sasam Ha'elyon, which is the highest level of the Garda Chachma. But we see what happens when there's too much light without vessels. It turns into something disgusting. It turns into something wasteful. The Imkain, the Tachlis of Moshe Rabbeinu, Alav Hashalom, was the secret of the Yisoid Da'aba, the secret of the midos and the halachos and the secret of protecting Klal Yisrael through Taurus Moshe is buried mul beis pa'or. It's married keneged beis pa'or, which is this klipa of tsoa in the element of zel umasa esa aloikim sheyichna Moshe Rabbeinu begard chachma shaloi esa klipa hatsoya sheyenekas megard chachma. Moshe Rabbeinu represents the gard chachma betahara that can be yuried down into the kalim of bina and the secret of the Yisod Abba. And it's only mida keneged mida that the gard chachma, this heliga hasaga of minamayim mishisihu from the gard chachma originally, that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to draw down this lofty hasaga, and it's only that hasaga of Moshe Rabbeinu that has the ability of being mevatel, the klipa and the achiza of the tsoa that Baal Pa'or and Sodom and Amorah carry within themselves, where they deny the necessity of the kalim. And this is the explanation of what Chazal tell us when they say that the tainug of the nekavim is me'ein oilam haba, that going to the bathroom is a semblance of a pleasure that is reserved for the future, because it's the hitznaitzitz of the fact that in those makomos mitunafos there is a ha'ara of the tainug of la'asalavo, that there's a kesher and yanika to the tainug of the nekavim from the tainug of the garda chachma. So we see that the begam of garda chachma is associated with this element of tsoa, with this element of too much pleasure without any vessel. And the same is true for Sodom and Amorah, that Sodom, the place of Sodom, hasagasam haisa migar the chachma lelo levushe habina. They were drawing from the lofty place of divine consciousness without the possibility of drawing it down into vessels whatsoever. V'chol ma'aseihem hageruyim yoinkim mesaydis al yoinim degar de chachma shenehefchu etzlam letzaya. And all of their misdeeds and all of the destructive tendencies that Chazal describe as Sodom being involved in were all rooted in the pagam that comes by grasping the highest levels of wisdom that become wasteful because they didn't have the capacity to draw it down into the vessels of Bina. Again, highlighting the necessity of drawing the light of Mashiach ben Yosef down into the kalim of Mashiach ben David, and the danger of going directly for the lights of Mashiach ben Yosef without the kalim of Mashiach ben David. Meaning, Sodom said there's an isser to give tzedakah, as it's explained in the Maisa of Super Maisios and the Baal HaTfilah, from the claim that everybody should be rich on their own, and that this is the true source of wisdom. They were all rooted in the Garda Chachma, Shesharish HaMamon. Their desire for each and every person to be wealthy is rooted in the loftiest places of Atikas Dima'ah, which is Notzei insights into Chochma, and therefore Sodom in their perverted ways, they took this notion and they felt that nobody should share with anybody else, and to share with somebody else would be considered a deficiency. So all of their crooked ways were rooted in a garda chachma, in a trying to draw down the loftiest levels of chachma without the vessels of bina, of only Mashiach ben Yosef without Mashiach ben David. We can explain every action of Sodom as rooted in a perversion of the garda chachma without drawing it down into the kalim of bina, and that's the secret of the tzoa that clogs up the Yarden, this danger of riboy oros that clogs up the Yarden, and why it can be compared to as the tzoa of the orzila, and why the tikkun has to take place by drawing together the Daled and the Gimel, and the secret of the Orzila Bar Yoma, the secret of Shabbos Kodesh, which is drawing Chachma down into the Kalim of Bina, the Havaya into the Kalim of Eke. Shakol Ma'iris Gavoyim Degar the Chachma Shenishberu Etzlam V'Niya Mizeh Chatam Hachi Gedolim. What we see by Sodom, what we see by Pa'or, what we see by this element of Tzoa, is that all of it is emergence from an attempt to be masig the Gar the Chachma, which breaks for them, which brings about the greatest sins in the world, rooted in the loftiest light imaginable. And the tikkun of the Gar the Chachma Shenishberu Ayidei Malchei Beis David. But the tikkun to this is going to be the inclusion of Malchus Beis David. Like we said, that Mashiach ben David represents the Kalim of Bina that are Mashbiat Zah, that can create the semblance of halacha and framework in order to be koilate and to be masig, the Iris of Yosef Tzaddik, which is the Chachma that's maskala within Malchus. And therefore, it's the Kalim of David Malka Mashiach that are going to develop the proper orientation towards the Gar de Chachma, towards those lights that are coming down from Mashiach ben Yosef, which is why David HaMelech is buried in Sodom. He's the tikkun to that. Moshe Rabbeinu is buried in Mulpor. He's the tikkun to that. Sha'atikun shel Sodom, what's the tikkun of Sodom? Zakt Chazal, Matzatzi David Avdi. I found David, my slave. Where did I find David, my servant? Heichan Matzativ, I found him in Sodom, because David HaMelech is the rectification of that place. It's the need to draw it down into Kalim, the secret that Yeravam ben Avat can't be first. David HaMelech has to come first. Hainu de Malchus Beis David, hu atikun de Sodom. Malchus Beis David, which represents the Kalim that are receiving the highest Oros, that's a tikkun to Sodom, which is just the highest Oros without Kalim. David HaMelech alav hashalom beside HaKeser. David HaMelech was rooted in the Keser of Bina, in the secret of Arich, and Shlomo is the secret of Chachma. Shlomo is the secret of the Chachma, which is the wisdom of Shlomo, which is the beginning of the Palga, the HaKeser, the other half of the Keser, and the secret of David and Shlomo, the secret of Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef, the Keser and the Chachma. So it's Shlomo represents the Chachma, which is associated with Yosef HaTzadik, and the proof that David HaMelech has shaykhus to it is that he has a son, Shlomo. And so instead of the yichud of Yosef and David, there's also the element of the yichud of David and Shlomo. David is the element of Keser, which is the element of Bina, which is the element of the necessity of Kalim, which is Mashiach ben David, and Shlomo represents the element of Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the element of the Oris of Chachma, which are Mashbi Lamata. That Hema Metaknin Hapegamim Degar de Chachma, that these two elements within David HaMelech, the Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef within Mashiach ben David, the Mahu Umashem Beno, the secret of Shlomo and David, that it's the Melech and the son of the Melech, that they're the ones who are going to rectify the Pagam of Sodom and the Riboy Oros of Gar de Chachma without Kalim. Shekemoisha b'Sodom Savr Machmas or Gavoya the Gar de Chachma she'en lashbia echad l'sheni tzedakah k'nizkala el. That as a result of the mistaken perspective of Sodom, where they assumed as a result of the lofty orientation towards Gar de Chachma that nobody should share anything with another person, there should be no charitable righteousness. Arizelu Maseh David Shlomo Yaviu la'asid kazeh or Gavoya shegar de Chachma metukan ad shebe'emes lo yimadu oid ishas re'ehu ve'ishas achiv lo yimer du'u es Hashem ki kulam yadu oisi mekatim yad gadam. David and Shlomo are going to be Megala, an or that Sodom thought they had an achiza on. The or of the Gar de Chachma, the or of Mashiach ben Yosef is so lofty that it in truth does have the capacity to create a richness and a wealth that is individualized, and each person can cultivate for themselves without receiving from the other, because each person is going to come to know the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's true. There's a hitznitzes, this la'asa level where there's going to be a bittul, but number one, the Kalim are still going to be exist, and number two, that's through David and Shlomo. That's not done through Sodom, who were just oiches on the Gar de Chachma, but didn't draw it down in the proper way. Shekol Yehudi in the future, Yizke l'shleimus kazoi shein sarach kvar lekabel klum mechavero, that a person is going to be zoichet to such a hasaga that they're really not going to have to receive from anybody else. And that's what Sodom thought was the Metzias, because they were poigim in the Gar de Chachma, without drawing it down into the midos of Bina. V'hamai and mebeis Hashem yetze, and the insight is going to come about from the house of Hashem. It's not going to come about from anything else. That's the secret of the Mei HaYarden, Yarden, which are Yorid from the Beis Hashem. And Kishiyavo l'shar Beis David, and when they come to the place of the gate of David, Yatayr es kol azvachim es kol mitzarim kedisa b'psukim, and there is going to be the clarification and the refinement of all concealment, meaning a zichuch of the kelim. Tainu sheyitaru malchei Beis David es kol hatzoa de Sodom u'dupaor. That Mashiach ben David is going to clarify all of the waste, all of the filth that comes about from the mistaken orientation and the misappropriation of the secrets of Gar de Chachma. And this is the secret of what the necessity is of drawing down the lights of Mashiach ben Yosef into Mashiach ben David, the Chachma into the Bina, and ensuring that while the circle does encircle the square, nevertheless, on an external level, the square is going to take precedence, because we have to begin with the binyan of the Kalim in order to ensure that it doesn't become a Riba Oirus. Zak the Heilige Rebbe. Dine Garda Chachma, what's the danger of Garda Chachma? Garda Chachma is maybe lebchina ani v'yeshes gadol. It can make a person feel that they are the one running the show. It can make a person feel that they have a real hasaga. And as a result of this, without the proper kalim and the bittul of bina and zer anpin, and a person may come to think that they can be like the klipa of Sidon, that all that exists is me. To the degree that there's no desire to be mashpia lamata down to those who are impoverished or those who don't have. And so too, gaiva and arrogance and the belief that a person can be whole and unified in themselves, only dealing with a Garda Chachma without any of the Kalim, that is the shorish of all of the Pagam, that is the shorish of all of the Tsoa that seems to be blocking the path for Klal Yisrael. The David Melech alav shalom, Shlomo Melech alav shalom. But these Malchei Beis David, the secret of Bina, the secret of the Kalim, Helam Atikun Shel Yeshus v'Hagaiva. They're the rectification of that sense of Yeshus and Gaiva that comes about with a Garda Chachma, because the Megala B'Tachlas is a Malchus de Kedusha Shenikras Ani. Because what they're really doing is they're utilizing all of those oros of Garda Chachma and they're bringing it down to the Ikr place, which is Malchus, which is the secret of Ani, which is rooted in the Nei Hashem Elekechem of the Ani de Kedusha. Sham Melachim Hakadoshim Halot Tzrichim Lehisanig Bechitzani Yisbarem Musachi Gedoyla. David and Shlomo were also operating with that same type of Yeshus that Sodom theoretically had, as we see that David Melech is found from within Sodom, this notion of that ego orientation. But nevertheless, by David Melech, it's completely mezuchach, because it's a goodness and a greatness and an expansion that is rooted completely in a bittul. And a Melech who's moichel and is kavod, they're not moichel. A Melech has to have a certain element of kavod. But this is the secret of the sod of Harim Keren Mashiachecha, that we have to elevate the head of Mashiach Tzidkenu, Shetzarech Shetiyeh that the Malachim, the Malchus Beis David, the Malchus has to elevate itself all the way back up to the Shorish of Chachma, but it has to be done by way of Kedusha and by way of Bittul. In the Bechina of Mishacha, the Tzavara, Tlasa, Parse, Sharama, Satsawar, the neck, which is the representation of Malchus Beis David, the Shorish of Chachma, Betikuno, the Shorish of the Avoid of Mashiach ben David, the Gaiva, the Kedusha, the brushing of the hair, that's rooted in the Garda Chachma in the right way. Acha Ani Shemalchus Beis David, when it comes to the Ani of Malchus Beis David, it becomes a Merkava for the Ani Hashem Lekechem in the aspect of Atik, Shafat Tzadik HaEmes Misnaig Begaiva, even though the Tzadik Emes is Misnaig Begaiva, and it appears that that typically stops up the Yarden. Nevertheless, the truth of the matter is that the Tzaddik Emes is walking internally, betachlas ha'ayin, like the Heilige Rishon, who walked with golden shoes, but they had no soles and his feet were bleeding. It's the shiftless, the derech of Malchus Beis David. It's the shiftless, it's the bittul of Malchus Beis David that operates with the roimumus and the gaiva b'chitzonius, with the grandeur and the nature of beauty on the outside, but shiftless and bittul amiti b'pnimius, which is the secret of drawing that down into the kalim of Bina. Vizesod Bei Merbata Deresha. And this is the secret of the place where the head is going to rest, in the unity of Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, in the aspect of the bittul, the shiftless be'emes, the gaiva and the bittul and the shiftless be'emes. That's the secret of the parsa and the palga, the yichud of David and Shlomo, which is a rectification of the iris of Mashiach ben Yosef within the lights of Mashiach ben David themselves, to be megala the yud of David, the shleimus of David HaMelech, which is the bittul and the yeshus at once. Shebe'emes darchem be'pinimius haisel lahashpil that in truth, all of the grandeur that Malchei David revealed externally was rooted with a deep, deep bittul and shiftless that was taking shape internally at every moment. La'azor la'aniyim v'shvelim. It's the hepech of the midah of Sodom. It's the hasag of the Garda Chachma that needs to be brought down into vessels of impoverishment rather than ignoring the impoverishment and thinking one is perfect, as is explained in the capital of Tehillim Ayin Beis Ba'arucha that speaks about Shlomo Melech and Melech HaMashiach. And when it appears that the tzaddik is operating in gaiva, like the closing up of the Nahar Yarden, which seems to take place when there's a Garda Chochma and there's a harama externally, like the Rashbam says, that's only for a moment because we have to reveal shetzarich legalis amarchus legalis bechinas ani. The tachlis is for the ani, the kli of ani, to build itself up in order that it can become a vessel for the Garda Chochma. Ach mitoich gile ha'ani shel davar melech tzaddik emes, but it's a sense of self that doesn't clog up. It doesn't become a tsoa because in truth there's no sense of self. It's going to be a skal self kol sof hayichud. The yichud is going to be revealed in the end. Sha'af shebetchila nira shaloi nesachid begile yetzal tzaddik va'ani va'ayin. Even though at first glance it's going to appear that there's going to be a separation between the sense of self and the sense of nothingness. The avoid of David and Yosef at tzaddik. Niras hagaiva shel David Melech kamay hatzaya shesoicher yarden, and the gaiva of the tzaddikim like David Melech, and the gaiva of the tzaddikim who seem to operate in the derech of David Melech is going to seem like the tsoa that's blocking up the Yarden, like everybody who was against David HaMelech, the Rosh of the Gedolei Ador, and you see this is Snagdus against the Rizhiner and Rabbeinu as well in terms of the Hisparus. Ari l'soif neskalish sam simu hamayim da bittul es hatzoa hagaiva. In the end, it's going to be revealed that in truth the waters of bittul made their way through to clear out all of the potential soa that comes with the hasaga of Gard the Chochma because it's being drawn down into the kalim of Bina. And the yichud of Chochma, of Mashiach ben Yosef, of the tsoa, when it's not brought down into the vessel, is going to be mechaber with the kli of the ani, with the kli of the bittel that comes along with Mashiach ben David. Hari b'soif neskala shesamsu amayim da bittel es hatzoa de gaiva v'neskala yichud da ani va'ayin u'meskala she'adarabba. The opposite is true. David HaMelech v'Shlomo HaMelech, the parson, the palga, the Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David within Mashiach ben David himself. That in truth it's going to be shown that the gaiva, the kedusha shalahem mis'achidim habittel, is operating at every single moment with the fundamental connectivity to bittel, the ha'ayin, the hamayim, v'hema kamayim, hatahirim shalahem mitaknim u'mesamsimim l'chalatzaya v'agaiva shaba'olam. And what's going to be revealed is that there will always have already been the flowing waters that purify the gaiva of the tsoa, and it's going to be the gard chachma that's nimshach into the kelim hametukim in the secret of the orzila bar yuma keniskala el, that the tikkun of all of the negativity and all of the impurity and all of the selfhood that exists in this world is going to be a way of the purifying waters that are going to flow forth through specifically the place of Malchei Beis David Kedi Isa Benavi B'Yoyel Be'ezras Hashem B'mhera B'Yamenu Amen.